Hey everyone, CWD Music here. I'm CWD, and this is going to be a music review of this latest track that Radiohead dropped last week, I Promise. Radiohead, if you're not in the know, is the long-running experimental rock group. They've technically been around since maybe the mid to late 80s, but didn't drop their debut album, Pablo Honey, until 1994. The 90s was very interesting for Radiohead. You saw them transform to a big pivotal force in experimental rock music. The Bends was a big step for them, going for a more slightly experimental and more moody and Britpopish sound from what Pablo Honey was. And OK Computer was the definitive apex of Radiohead's rock-oriented sound. Then they experimented with IDM and electronica with Kid A, and every album after that knew no bounds whatsoever. I reviewed their album A Moon-Shaped Pool last year, and it ended up being my favorite album of last year, given how it was a combination of both what Radiohead was doing with the 90s and what Radiohead had done in the past, to the point where it still sounded so fresh and so well executed. And that's exactly what this track that just dropped last week, I Promise, is. It's not a new track by any means. The track's existed for at least 20 years now, but hasn't seen the light of day up until now. This was actually recorded during the, from what I understand, the OK Computer era, but didn't end up making the cut. But now, since OK Computer is getting a reissue called OKNOTOK, they decided to go ahead and release this track as a sort of a teaser. I pre-ordered a special box set for this reissue, and I'm definitely going to be doing a unboxing of sorts. As of right now though, we have this track, I Promise, which included is a really weird music video, which I'm still trying to make heads or tails of. Pretty much the video is about this animatronic head on a bus just looking out at the window, seeing all these human faces, a lot of it being apathy up until the end, which he seems to experience a woman being sad, and he feels something about that. Pretty much a music video about human detachment in a way, how we feel like we're all just along for the ride in life and not so much someone that is experiencing it, even if at times to its fullest, is pretty sad. As far as the song goes, it definitely sounds like it's of the Bends era, and I guess that's why it didn't make it to OK Computer, because it ended up not sounding that cohesive with OK Computer, given how political and how experimental and how upfront the album was. This track, it sounds pretty Bends era-ish from the way the acoustic guitar is predominant throughout the course of the track, and I do love how the drum rolling is pretty much syncopated with the acoustic guitar and bass guitar rhythm all throughout. Tom singing, still as great as it was during the 90s. There's not really anything that is inconsistent about Tom's vocals, not just then but now as well with this track. And the lyrics seem to be about promising this person that they're going to be there for them regardless of whatever the hell happens. The beauty of Tom as a lyricist is that he's able to take simple refrains like I Promise throughout the course of a song and make it emotionally powerful with each individual line. I won't run away no more, I promise. Tie me to the rotting deck, I promise. There's just so much negative imagery going on that Tom is describing, but at the end of it, he still promises to be there. And when you think about it, I promise is a very, very strong phrase. Usually you don't ever live up to promises. Sometimes you do, but more often than not, you promise and it ends up being like a dead end in that regard. And then you wonder why you make promises in general, or why anyone else makes promises in general. And it's kind of a fresh of breath air for anyone that feels like they've been let down in life to have Tom say, "I promise, I promise, I promise," over the course of a track. And I think the building instrumentation sells the urgency of Tom's lyricism. It's definitely a beautiful track, and a track that I just keep returning to a lot. If this wouldn't end up being on the Bends, I would have loved the Bends a little more. Though the Bends itself was a really good album, I just felt like that this track would have been a better fit for the Bends instead of just stuffed away and then brought to light like 20 years later. It really says a lot about a band when your throwaway tracks or your B-sides are this good, you know? And that's pretty much all I have to say about this track. It's not new, I'm not going to really rate it or anything. I'm just going to say that this track is really good, and I'm glad it's finally seen the light of day. And if this is a sign of what's to come on this reissue that's coming out, then I'm really excited. But if you've given this track a listen, what'd you think of it? Did you like this track? Did you dislike this track? What are some tracks that I should consider trying out and maybe doing a video of, and what did you think of those? The CWD Music here, signing off.